Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also support the show by visiting patreon.com/The Bitter Truth, or just go straight to the website, thebittertruth.info, INFO. And there you can hit up the Patreon link if you want. You can just do a one-time donation to help the show or buy some fabulous swag to make your life better. The t-shirts and the books and everything are available in the various Patreon packages, but you can buy them individually if you don't want to be a subscriber. A lot of people have issues with subscriptions these days. I get it, but it helps the show. So however you want to do it, we appreciate the support. Today, just a couple things on my mind. Been traveling for work a little bit and just, watching things online and all of that. And, one of the things that really frustrates me about the liberal, and I won't say the left or the progressives, although the progressive caucus has like 100 people in it and they're basically Republican Democrats. But, people on the left that, really want to go after unifying the party. We got to unify the party. They're afraid of losing in the midterms. Quick side note there, by 2022, the Democrats will lose in the midterms because they didn't do anything for the people that got them into office and or have been keeping them in office low these many years. So, for example, when you hear AOC or whoever championing Gavin Newsom's recall thing, you can't let the Republicans in there. Have you been to California lately? It's a blue state with a blue state house and a blue governor, and yet they have all the problems that a red state has. They've got homeless people. They got homeless vets. They've got people that are starving. I hate the term food insecure because it sounds like you're trying to avoid an allergy. It's another soft term because starving sounds like what it is. Kind of like, how they say PTSD instead of shell shock because, when you're shot at or watch your friends get blown up, you're going to be kind of fucked up. But don't say that. Say PTSD. It sounds like you have carpal tunnel. So what is this unity bullshit? I want to get into that because I'm a man of a certain age, seen some things, read a little bit, been around, and all I have ever seen with the unity crap is that it's just that it's crap because there's no time in this history of this, in the history of this country that we've ever been unified. I'm going to jump into some of these examples down here in a second. But when I see both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, going on about uniting, it's almost like a nationalist bent, which I think is dangerous because nationalism is basically a shortcut to fascism. Because when people say what's wrong with being a nationalist? Well, what is the narrative then? What is the story of this country? If you're a nationalist, do we have the sanitized George Washington never told a lie and cut down the cherry tree bullshit? Or do we have the actual history of this country, which is based on thievery and genocide and murder and rape and keeping a bunch of Africans as slaves for about 300 years before we finally let them go? And even then, we still had Jim Crow and everything else for another 150 years where folks couldn't buy homes. They couldn't, they couldn't vote. There's all kinds of things that Jim Crow was able to do, or as he's formerly known these days, James Crow. But when I hear both parties going on about unity, it's always about some bullshit corporate talking point. Because what do they want us to unify over? War for corporate profits? I mean, what have we been fighting for these last 20 years? And I'm just going to stay at the last 20 years because that's within most of our lifetimes. If I start getting into Vietnam and the Spanish-American War and stuff that I've gone into on this show with experts, people's eyes have a tendency to glaze over because they're like, I don't remember Vietnam. Well, you don't remember the Iraq War either, idiot, because guess what? We're being lied into China now. We need a more muscular response to China. Couldn't be because they've catapulted 600 million people out of 1.5 billion into the middle class in the last 10 years, which you will not see covered on the mainstream press because MSNBC or Fox News don't want you to see that while we're eroding our middle class and starving them, we have 25 million people that are starving in this country. Again, I said food insecure is bullshit. It's starving. And we've got about 11 million people that are facing eviction. I think 1.5 million this month alone are facing eviction. So don't show them that. Don't show them that China, even though they have their shitty Foxconn jobs too, They still catapulted 600 million people into the middle class, the fastest recorded in history since we've been recording history. And actually, if you want to really be a dick, China is better recording their history than we are. White people had a Bronze Age, about 1,000 years, where Europe didn't record any history. So all kinds of crazy shit happened. Real Game of Thrones type crap, where women were having poop thrown on them and all that kind of thing. But China, they've been recording their history pretty diligently for however many thousands of years through all the dynasties, including all the genocides that they've endured at the hands of the Japanese. That's a whole nother show. But we're saber rattling China now because we want to unify the country. Couldn't be that we also realized that China found a bunch of natural gas and oil in the South China Sea about 3 years ago, which is why Trump sent ships into the South China Sea for military drills, and Biden still has them there. He hasn't pulled them. And why? Because we're trying to unify the country. Look at all the wars that we've been in. We're bombing 19 countries right now, right? We're bombing 19 countries right now. So what are we going to unify over to go against who? I don't live anywhere else. So when people say go somewhere else, or if you don't like it, leave. Well, fuck you. I live here. I can't modulate what Sweden does, but this is the only country that I can see in the industrialized world anyway, that operates on the politics of scarcity and fear. We never, ever try to mobilize people over. Hey, let's team up and help homeless people. Let's have a strike a general strike at banks in front of Wells Fargo to guarantee moratoriums for homeowners and that therefore renters, because a lot of rental properties are not Blackstone and these massive corporations. They're like a mom and pop, who had a property in their family, a couple of them, for 20 years, 30 years, whatever. And they got to pay the expenses and they got to pay the repairs and they got to do all the stuff. And they're making a little money every month. Maybe it depends on where you live. In California, you are going to be upside down for a minute before you see any equity benefit whatsoever. But in most states, you can actually make a couple $100 extra on top of your insurance and everything else. But we're not going to help those people, right? So why don't we have a general strike at the banks? Who actually got trillions of dollars. Wall Street and the banks got trillions of dollars last year, while the average American got about $2,000 to get them through maybe 2 weeks or a month. I mean, that covers rent, maybe in some places. And that was $2,000 spread out. So I'm actually, my math is bad. So you had the $1,200, you had the $600, you had was there $1,000? Okay. So about $3,000 in an 18-month period during a pandemic where people lost their jobs and now we're going to evict people. So where's this unity coming from? Is it over race? We're going to unify over race? You mean race relations, how we treat people? We can't even agree on how to teach race history in this country. You got a bunch of conservative white people fucking crying like babies that, God forbid, critical race theory. What is that? I don't know if it's another fancy name for history where we actually had slaves and hanged people till like the 1970s. And in some parts of this country, we still do it. Police brutality since 2005, there's been 3 convictions out of 17,000 cases of unarmed Black or brown people being shot by cops, about 1,000 a year, right? I'm not talking about the guy running at the 7-Eleven, with a gun and ski mask and, doing crazy shit. I'm talking about a 13-year-old kid with his hands up, getting shot, that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so where's the uproar over that? And now that Biden is president, we don't see any marches. BLM is gone. BLM is Casper the Friendly Ghost. BLM is no mo. BLM's gone, dude. Where are they? We've had more than a handful of shootings since Biden's become president. How are we unifying to help race relations in this country, right? I see the so-called liberal right back to sleep. I wrote an essay last year for my website called Lullaby and Goodnight, and wrote the day after the election. Like it doesn't take a rocket scientist or Nostradamus to figure out what was going to happen once Biden got into office. Same fucking thing that happened when Obama got into office. Everyone went to sleep. The only war protesters I saw were Cindy Sheehan and Medea Benjamin, and a handful of people that would be in the street. But it wasn't like when Bush was president, and people are storming the White House and they're protesting in front of the White House. And when Iraq was going on, Afghanistan was going on, Obama comes in, everyone goes Betty bye, right? He takes 2 illegal wars and turns them into 7. Huh? We're bombing Somalia. We're bombing Sudan, Libya, Syria, Iraq. I mean, wow, that's amazing. Because I thought he was supposed to be the peace guy. So are we unifying over medical? We had 200,000 people die last year during the COVID crisis who had no medical insurance coverage whatsoever. And maybe their lives could have been saved if they had coverage. They had nothing. And they died as a result of COVID, but also they had no coverage. We've had 800,000 people die in this country so far. 200,000 of them had no coverage, and 50,000 people a year die because of a lack of coverage in this country. And are we unifying over that? Right? Education, student debt forgiveness. $1.2 trillion was one day of bank bailouts. That's student debt in this country. Can you imagine that kind of money going back into the economy? This is when the finance bros like to say shit like, well, you give it for free. Well, first of all, I went to college for free. Most women, men and women my age went to college for free, right? Or pretty close to free. You paid a service fee, if you will. My old school was $100 a quarter, all you can eat units. Okay. It was a service fee. You didn't pay what my friend's kid graduated a couple of years ago paid, $7,000 a quarter to go to my old school, and it wasn't Harvard. We just regular old Cal Poly Pomona, nice, good school. I'm glad I went there, but it wasn't $7,000 a quarter. Right. And labs and things like that weren't extra. We can't even unify over a UBI, right? Because you got the finance bros again saying, well, you want something for free. Listen, I'm not trying to buy people a summer home, but to have some sort of a safety net. And by the way, if you're cool with 11 million people about to lose their residences, if you're cool with 25 million starving people in the richest country in the world, then you'll pardon me for saying, but you're an asshole. And there's no other way to say that. Yeah, you're a fucking asshole. There's just no other way to say that. I don't have any kids. I don't mind my taxes going up 0.3 or a half a point or even a whole percentage point, God forbid, to cover daycare. I don't know why a family has to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year for daycare, right? Until their kids get into kindergarten. Especially those pro-life pricks that love to say, well, every life is sacred. Really? Well, but fuck daycare, right? It's just stuck on the parents. And by the way, these are things that every country has. Every industrialized country in the world, the Nords, the EU, most of the Asian countries have what I'm talking about. We're so just lulled into this stupidity, right? And then the Democrats, they love to do this bipartisan fetish, right? Biden's in there right now. We're trying to do a bipartisan thing. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to do it because I'm trying to be bipartisan. First of all, it's a fetish. There's no such thing as the moderate Republican. The Democrats have been chasing this moderate Republican since the 80s. It doesn't exist. It's not even a unicorn. Unicorns exist. This doesn't exist. Excuse me one second. Got a nice tall whiskey soda on a Friday afternoon. Don't you wish you were me? This doesn't exist. To go ahead and start, or not start, but to go ahead and continue this fantasy of going after the moderate Republican by doing these right-wing things, you're not going. It doesn't exist. And by the way, when the GOP is in power, they don't do a across the aisle thing. They don't give a fuck for bipartisan. They're in power. They rule the roost. They're going to run the show, as evidenced by the judges that they got through under Trump. By the way, the Democrats put up zero fight on the federal judges that they had the right to have a 2-hour hearing for every one of Trump's appointees. And in one 2-week period, right before Labor Day weekend, 2017, Chuck Schumer rushed through 26 Trump appointees, because he wanted to make the Labor Day vacation, right? Forget that these guys are lifetime appointments. Forget that they're Trump people, right? And now you're looking at all the federal judges, and now this is what the Democrats are going to say in the midterms. Well, you're going to get more if you do. No, you fucking assholes. No, you could have fought. You want to talk to me about goddamn Ruth Bader Ginsburg? She had cancer 3 times. She should have retired under Obama, but she's a self-serving egotist who decided to stay on the bench and then die on the bench. And then Obama couldn't do jack because at this point it didn't matter. And then Trump appointed who he wanted, right? And who did he appointed 3 people, right? He appointed 3 conservative people. One of them is like a Catholic cultist, Amy Coney Barrett's a fucking crazy person. But that's what happens when the Democrats offer nothing. The biggest voting bloc in this country is independents and third parties. That's 50%. of the voting bloc. 25% are Democrats, 25% are Republicans. Okay. And yet, do we go after that voting bloc? Do the Democrats go after that voting bloc? No, they don't. You're offering nothing. Couldn't get a minimum wage passed, but we're supposed to unify behind you. Couldn't get Medicare for all even on the floor for a vote. Supposed to rally behind you. UBI, that's not going to happen. The eviction moratoriums, the little circus that Cori Bush and AOC pulled a few weeks back, and the very next week the Supreme Court shot it down because like, yeah, the Congress is supposed to do that. It's all show. It's all show. It's all kabuki theater. There's no meaning behind it whatsoever. And then, I get the libertarian bros who want to crow about race being used to divide us. There's no racism. They're just using it the media is using it to divide us. Okay, well, you sound every bit as fucking stupid, and you're wasting your time. By the way, I'll tell you why you're wasting your time. Chasing that ghost, that there is no racism, and it's just a figment of our imagination, so that we could be unified. Well, first of all, we're not. So, pop that little fantasy out of your fucking head right now, because we're not unified. We've never been unified. We're not going to be unified over race. Okay. Colin Kaepernick took a fucking knee for a good reason. And immediately there was a straw man argument created that he was unpatriotic and disrespecting the flag and disrespecting troops. By the way, if you really support the troops, you want to call them home because they're just fighting for profit. $2 trillion went into the defense contractors over the Afghanistan war. And if you don't see that, then you're a fucking idiot. And I know I sound kind of harsh, and some people go, you shouldn't talk like, oh, fuck off. I'll tell you what, the reason I do this show, and the reason why it's called The Bitter Truth and not Big Wet Kiss, is because whatever mood I'm in is the mood I'm in, and the mood my guests are in, that's just what it is. But I'm telling you the truth. This is all true. And we haven't been fighting for American interests, unless you want to count Raytheon's American interests or Boeing's American interests, but not your American interests. If you're living in your car, we didn't go to Afghanistan for you. If you're a veteran living in a tent with a flag on it, we didn't go to Iraq for you. We didn't send you there to protect us. We sent you there to protect American corporate interests, companies. Your mom was not in harm's way. Your sister was not in harm's way. Your dad was not in harm's way. Your husband was not in harm's way. No one was in harm's way. But yet you get the libertarian bros who want to sound all cool and hip and that there's no racism and this is used to divide us. It's all in the past. No, it's not in the fucking past. It's not in the fucking past. And if you want to discuss it, email me. Come on my show and discuss it. Because the challenge I have with a lot of people is that they're gigantic pussies. They'll talk shit in a bar. But when you invite them to come on the show, I don't want to go on the record. Well, then shut the fuck up. Don't be passionate about something that you know nothing about, by the way. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. You don't know anything, but you're going to be passionate about it. You can't do that. That's what idiots do. That's what morons do. That's what fucking Republicans do. That's what Democrats do. That's what idiots do. 80% of this country is populated with idiots. And I know I'm not going to get a bigger audience by saying that, but that's okay. Those idiots don't listen to my fucking show. Or shows like this. They listen to Pod Save America or, CRTV, right? Basically Fox and MSNBC wannabes, right? So whatever. So my point to the liberal bros who do this racism shit, you're wasting your time by going on this no racism. It's dividing us. It's being used by the media. You're wasting your time just like the so-called liberal in this country wastes our time saying that we need to be unified as a country and support these different groups that are marginalized. You want to support groups that are marginalized? Give them a fucking UBI. Create jobs in their area. Let them do worker co-ops every time GM or Ford closes a factory to go to Monterrey, Mexico. There are 500 worker co-ops in this country, one of whom is Ocean Spray Cranberry. Okay, you might want to look into that. And of the the average of the 500 worker co-ops in this country, the average bonus every year is $19,000, and the average pay is $20 an hour. Now, of course, that's up and down. And the average CEO doesn't make more than 10 times that of the lowest paid worker. That's what it used to be like in the 60s and 70s. When we still had unions in this country. And now, because Reagan brought in stock buybacks in his first term, and stock buybacks are wholly illegal, should be wholly illegal, because it's basically market manipulation and price fixing. So what do you do when you're a company that spends 50% on average of their cash buying back stock? And then when crises happen, like the COVID crisis, for example, they suddenly have no money because they've been spending all their money buying stocks so that they can pay their C-level guys 20, 30, 50 million a year to do jack and shit. because I promise you, the CEO of General Motors is not working any harder than the assembly line guy. I guarantee it. He works about maybe 3 days in a week and half day on Friday, guaranteed. So you're going to sit there and tell me that he deserves to make $50 million a year? No. So anyway, that point being what it is. So what has to happen? What has to go on, right? I mean, I can rant and rave all I want all afternoon, but what has to happen? Well, we have to start punching up. We're not punching up. We're punching sideways. We're arguing with each other over gays, guns, and abortion. Those are the big three that the oligarchs and the two-party system love us to fight about. Because while they're important, not much that the president can do about it, right? And one could argue, well, you got these draconian abortion laws being passed in these different states. Well, then you protest the state house. That's what you do. That's what you're going to have to do. Electoral politics is not going to be enough, and it has been for a long time. But Americans have, for some reason, lost the stomach to protest. They lost the stomach to carry a fucking sign. And I don't mean getting a permit within these lines and these lines. I mean protesting, like blocking traffic, like Martin Luther King level shit. But yeah, what we're gonna have to do is start punching up, because what do they have us fighting over? Kneeling, BLM, like BLM is actually something to argue about. White Republicans last summer were on my ass, messaging me and stuff like that. Friends of mine that I know and people that don't know me, that just know me from online. And, coming up with all these excuses and all these reasons why all these people were shot by cops unarmed, then they deserved it, right? Because they deserved it, right? They have us fighting over that. This isn't even a discussion. We're fighting over vaccines. Like I said, 200,000 people died, or 300,000 people died during the during this COVID epidemic, without so much as a doctor visit, because they had no medical whatsoever. Social services, people actually arguing about Social Security or unemployment or Medicare. These are things that we pay for, you fucking financial bro idiot. We pay for this. If you don't have a paycheck, or if you haven't looked at your stub ever, there's little slots there for deductions that you pay. You pay for this. So sit there and call it an entitlement and wanting to privatize it, because privatizing in this country has really worked out whiz bang awesome, hasn't it? Again, can I say fucking idiot for a 50th time? You're a fucking idiot. So when was this country ever united? To be very blunt, I ask you, when were we ever united? We weren't united over slavery. We had a civil war over it, but the right side won. And eventually slavery was, made illegal. And as a result of that, we incorporated a bunch of people into citizenship, and even extended citizenship to people that were born here, even though their parents were not. That would never have happened at the formation of the Constitution. So you get these constitutional originalists. That's a whole nother hour I could do by myself. That's what they're talking about. That's a whole nother thing. Women voting. When were we ever united about women voting? Right. When were we united over civil rights, or the Voting Rights Act in the 60s, when Johnson signed those into law? 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, 100 years after slavery was made illegal, 100 years after the 13th Amendment, right? When were we united? No, we weren't united. What ends up happening, but this is the way the oligarchs want it. They want you fighting. They want you fighting each other, right? They want you saying stupid shit like, well, if he doesn't get the COVID vaccine, he deserves to die. Well, you know what? Last I checked, and I'm paraphrasing from The Big Short, stupidity, and also A Few Good Men, I think. Stupidity is not illegal, right? If stupidity was illegal, my brother's brother-in-law should be bludgeoned, because he's a fucking idiot. And I won't go into his, story, but he's a moron. So there's that. But that's how the oligarchs want it. What ended up happening, all these things I talked about, slavery, women's rights, everything else. What happens is the few lead, and then the thing gets made normal, treated as accepted. And then suddenly it gets momentum, and then it gets passed, right? Woodrow Wilson didn't grant women the right to vote because he was this great guy. It's because they were protesting for like 50 years, since the 1850s, probably, the women's suffrage movement. So finally, 50 years later, when Woodrow Wilson signed that into law, that was pressure and protests and everything else, right? Slavery, obviously. How did the Republican Party get started? In 1854, you had a bunch of, Whigs and pissed off Democrats who didn't dig slavery and started the Republican Party. Lincoln was a Whig when he was in Congress, right? When he was a representative before he ran for Senate as a Republican, and he lost in 1858 to Stephen Douglas, but that's a whole other thing. I say all that to say that was not a popular idea, okay? But they got it through with pressure. I mean, the abolitionist movement was a good 30, 40 years old by the time slavery was abolished in 1864, 63. So, that's the point in all of this. We have to start punching up. And then what happens is everything becomes, what did Arthur Schopenhauer say? At first something is opposed, violently opposed, and then it's ridiculed, and then it becomes self-evident. Gay marriage is the most recent thing I can think of. By the way, those of you who voted for Biden, he voted for DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act in the 90s, and Clinton signed that into law and went onto the 700 Club to brag about it. So when you want to sit there and act like, being a Democrat is morally superior, you're an idiot. There's no moral superiority to the Democrats. They are every bit as bad as the Republicans. They're just nicer with nicer tweets. That's it. They're just not as batshit insane. That's it. But when with DOMA though, it was finally overturned in the Supreme Court, but it was made into law, right? And everyone's like, well, yeah, civil unions and all these dancing around the fucking idea based on Bible shit, right? Finally, became self-evident. And now I don't really know anybody, even right-wingers I know, don't give a shit about gay marriage. That's been like in the last 10 years. Did that happen overnight? No. Yeah, they have, the gay rights protests, which started basically in the 60s, around the same time as all the other civil rights movements were going on with the Native Americans and civil rights, with the Black movement in this country. The Latino movement later on came about in the late 60s, early 70s, Cesar Chavez, with workers' rights and all of that. That was all started by protesting. And then and only then did it become self-evident, right? I mean, with like I said, gay marriage, that's something that's within our memory span. And now it's just accepted. Nobody gives a shit. I work my day job and I go into businesses all the time. And, you're in meetings and stuff. And there's a woman that says her wife and or a guy that says his husband. And I'm in Texas. And it's like, nobody bats an eye. Nobody flinches. And whatever their personal opinion is, they learned at this point to keep it to themselves because nobody wants to fucking hear it. Who cares? If two people over 18 years old want to do whatever, who fucking cares? What business is it of yours? It's not. So bottom line is we're going to have to all start. You want unity. You want unity, five things you agree with and start punching up. If you want unity, because otherwise it's just it's a big, beautiful lie. Unity is a big, beautiful lie. People dancing in the street when Trump lost. We're here almost a year into 10 months into the Biden presidency. And what have we gotten? Everything that Trump would have done, but with nicer tweets. Everything that Trump would have done with the seal of approval from the fucking Democratic Party. Joe Biden's record is everything Trump would have done. Everything from the environment to the economy to medical to the wars. He got out of Afghanistan and everyone's giving him shit. I'll throw a little defense, blue Jesus's way. I could give a fuck how he got out of Afghanistan. How, it was so messy. It was, oh my God, it was so botched. We got out of Vietnam. It was botched. We got out of Korea. It was botched. The last thing we got out of that was remotely graceful was World War II. And that was only because we had a return address. And between us and the Russians, we actually defeated our enemies there, and Japan as well. People always love to forget that Russia fought Japan in China. They were 75% responsible for us winning World War II. They were in the European theater for a long time before we came in. And even D-Day was way late in the game. Right. And, and everyone's like, oh my God, well, you French would be speaking German if it wasn't for us. The French would be speaking German if it wasn't for the Russians, because the Russians were beating the shit out of the Nazis for a while. And the Russians lost 20 million soldiers. I'm not talking about the guys that Stalin killed. He was a maniac too. But the Russians lost 20 million soldiers. America lost about 450,000 soldiers. But you're never going to hear that in the mainstream press because Russia's the new demon. But what we have to do is we have to start punching up, and we have to quit doing this shit sideways to each other. And those of you that want to find these little petty, stupid things like, well, there's no race problem, you're a fucking moron. And I know I'm talking to some of my own friends here. I get it. But you're an idiot when you sit there and argue that and waste your time and your breath arguing that there's no racism. When I know Black people in my life, friends of mine, who have stories up the ass from just last week. Okay. So lose that shit. You want to unify people? You want to unify this country? Give them something to unify about. Give them something to vote for. Give people a reason to get off their ass and come out and vote. Beto's thinking about running for governor. Who fucking cares? Robert Francis O'Rourke is going to run for governor in Texas. Why? So he can flame out in spectacular fashion like he did against Ted Cruz and in the Democratic primary? Guy lost his mind in the Democratic primary. He couldn't even stay focused on anything that wasn't some, stupid 2-bit platitude about taking people's guns away or whatever, because he had nothing to say because he's a corporate Democrat. He had nothing to offer. He wasn't going to offer Medicare for all Texans. He wasn't going to offer a UBI for all Texans. He wasn't going to offer any sort of extended unemployment during a pandemic for all Texans. Right. And this was last year during the pandemic, as president, rather. And now he's going to run for governor to do what? The same shit as Governor Hot Wheels, only this time it'll be ignored because it's a Democrat. And everyone's going to oh my God, but it's Beto. Robert Francis O'Rourke is not Beto O'Rourke. He's a fucking white guy. Any more than Ted Cruz is Ted. His name is Raphael. All right. And I got a couple of friends named Raphael that hate that, but whatever, that's life. My first name is Ibrahim. I mean, terrorist or whatever you want to call a terrorist is not my first name. It's always great on the day of a bombing when I'm at the airport. I get randomly selected for additional screening, and that's a true story. So anyway, well, that's kind of about all I got this afternoon, and ranty that it was. I hope you got something out of it, and hopefully not a little insulted. You know what I mean? I'm not here to placate. I'm here to do my best with my limited resources to educate as much as I can. Right. And obviously it's a good idea if you read stuff on your own. I wouldn't recommend necessarily watching stuff, even though I do. Start reading first. Quit watching TV. Quit watching MSDNC. Quit watching fucking Fox News. Quit watching that shit. It's pure shit. There's no news anymore. It's just a bunch of people in an air-conditioned room opining on the events of the day. And it's usually stupid crap. Did Trump teabag a stripper or not? Whatever. Is Biden a rapist? Yeah, he is. And that's probably kind of important. If it's going to be important for the other guy, it should be important for Biden, but nobody seems to give a shit. But nobody talks about policy. Nobody talks about what we're doing in Cuba. They'll show you a bunch of, doctored videos with blurred out signs. And when you see something else and the sign's not blurred out, apparently the Cubans like living there and they would wish that we would quit sanctioning them. Start asking better questions. Why does Venezuela have the problems they have? Meanwhile, capitalist, quote unquote, Colombia right next door is, but they're our allies because they're capitalists. So we ignore the fact that they have a 50% poverty rate, rig elections, murder journalists, kill campesinos by the thousands, and quash labor unions in that country, not limited to assassinating labor leaders. Everything they do is a human rights violation, but because they're on our side, we ignore it. Whereas Venezuela has none of those problems except for their poverty rate, which we keep jacking up because of sanctions. But they had a higher literacy rate and they had zero unemployment when we were leaving them alone. But we want their oil for free. And on this last note, as I leave, I want you to think about what the Chinese are doing, because I'll hear people say, well, it's still China. Okay, well, they're an imperialist power. Powers this big are imperialist. Just that's the nature of the beast. But how they run their foreign policy, how they run their business, I hate to say it, as much as people want to say they're authoritarian. Really? You've been driving around this bitch lately? We're not authoritarian in this country. Shows like mine get suppressed, demonetized, blocked, deplatformed all the time. And, and meanwhile, Washington Post can print something like there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Never have to print a retraction. Rolling Stone just fucked up on this COVID report about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they called it an update when they when they went to retract it, the ivermectin story that, there are thousands of people in hospitals, which wasn't true. All they did was say, oh, it's an update. Oh yeah, apparently. But every news outlet in this country went ahead and retweeted it, reprinted it without double checking themselves. I got friends that are and were reporters. You got to have 3 sources to confirm a story. Not, I got it from Rolling Stone. I'm going to put my spin on it and just copy and paste and just reprint it. That's not journalism. And I'm not a journalist. And even I know that. Anyway, that's just it, man. Kind of done. And again, support the show, thebittertruth.info. We appreciate it. Like I said, if you don't want to subscribe to something, hit the one-time donate button, or if you want to buy something cool. I like the t-shirts particularly. When I run out of those, I'll probably reprint the t-shirts with the logo that's on the website now. But when I originally came up with that idea for the logo that's on the t-shirt and what's on the YouTube panels, I think, I was going for something like a Husker Du album, which was my kind of goal at the time. I wanted something to look like an old SST record. And now I'm lost 90% of you because none of you know what Husker Du is or what the old SST record label was. But anyway, that's what happens when you're a music fan, a guy my age. So there you go. Again, thebittertruth.info. Appreciate the support. And if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.